It started in the most ordinary place, a grocery store parking lot on a Saturday afternoon. I had just finished loading 2 bags of protein shakes and eggs into the trunk of my black SUV. I was wearing a plain gray hoodie and navy training pants, nothing flashy. Just another guy trying to get through his errands before the gym. As I closed the trunk, a white sedan screeched to a halt next to me, practically brushing against my bumper. A couple, mid-40s, dressed in golf polos and attitudes, jumped out. The man immediately pointed at my car. "You just took the spot we were waiting for," he said sharply. I blinked. "I didn't see you signaling." "We were circling," the woman barked, stepping closer. "You think the world owes you something?" I didn't respond to that. I just looked them both in the eye and calmly said, "If this spot means that much to you, I'll move." But that wasn't good enough. Not for them. They weren't after the parking space anymore, they wanted a reaction. The man sneered. "What, too good to say sorry?" I stayed quiet, grabbing my receipt from the passenger seat. That seemed to fuel them even more. "You think you're some kind of tough guy, huh?" the man taunted. "Bet you've never had to work for anything." That one made me pause. I looked at him for a long second, then simply said, "You really don't want to go down this road." But they kept going. They had no idea who they were talking to. No idea what I'd been through. No idea that I was a retired Navy SEAL with multiple deployments, 2 Purple Hearts, and more discipline in one breath than they'd shown in their entire tantrum. And karma? Karma was already pulling up in the next lane. As I stood by my car, choosing silence over escalation, a low rumble rolled through the lot. A massive black pickup truck pulled into the row behind us. Out stepped a tall, broad-shouldered man in full uniform, Marine dress blues. He wasn't just any Marine. He was Master Gunnery Sergeant Cole Ramirez, my old teammate. We'd served in 2 joint ops overseas. He wasn't just military, he was legendary in certain circles. And, as fate would have it, had parked just a few spots over. He clocked the scene instantly. "Mike," he called out, voice steady. I gave him a slight nod. The couple looked between us, clearly not recognizing the sudden shift in the air. Cole walked over, his medals catching the sunlight. "Everything all right here?" The man with the golf shirt scoffed. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just dealing with someone who doesn't understand how parking lots work." Cole raised an eyebrow. "This someone is a decorated Navy SEAL. Maybe show a little more respect." The woman's smile froze. "Wait, he's military." "Retired SEAL Team 6, Cole said flatly. "One of the finest men I've ever served with. And if you're standing here running your mouth, you're already out of your depth." The man's mouth opened, then closed. And that's when it happened. A sheriff's deputy SUV rolled into the lot, blue lights flashing. Apparently someone had called about a confrontation. Not me. The officer stepped out, but before he could say a word, Cole turned and saluted. "Afternoon, sir." The deputy snapped to attention. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Ramirez? Didn't expect to see you here." He turned to me. "Wait, is that Commander Hall?" Suddenly the couple looked like they wanted to melt into the pavement. Cole glanced at me and whispered, 7 minutes flat. "Told you karma moves fast." The man and woman stood frozen, jaws slightly agape as the deputy walked over to me with newfound alertness. "Commander Hall," he said, adjusting his stance. "I apologize for the delay. We had a call come in, something about a dispute. Everything all right?" I nodded calmly. "No harm done. Just a misunderstanding over a parking spot." The deputy looked at the couple. His gaze narrowed. "Are these the individuals who made the call?" "They were the ones upset," I replied, still composed. I offered to move, but things got unnecessarily tense. The deputy turned to them. "You made a report about a confrontation, and failed to mention you were harassing a Navy SEAL?" The man stammered, "We didn't know. He didn't say." The deputy's voice dropped. "You don't get to treat people like garbage and then hide behind ignorance when it backfires. Especially not someone who's put their life on the line for your right to stand in this parking lot and scream." The woman's voice cracked. "We didn't mean any harm. It was just frustrating." "Frustrating doesn't justify disrespect," the deputy said. "And certainly not this level of it." Cole folded his arms. "People forget there's a cost to everything. You never know who you're talking to, or what they've done for this country while you were arguing about convenience." There was a long silence. The couple had nothing left to say. The deputy turned back to me. "Sir, do you want to press charges for verbal harassment?" I shook my head. "No. I think they've learned something more valuable than a fine." But I could tell from their pale expressions that the real punishment had already landed, and it had nothing to do with legal action. It was the crushing realization of who they'd just tried to humiliate, and how deeply they'd misjudged the moment. The man stepped forward, clearly struggling to gather himself. His voice, once sharp and aggressive, was now small and uneven. I'm sorry, sir. We didn't mean any disrespect. He glanced at his wife, searching for backup. She avoided his gaze. I looked at him for a beat, then nodded slowly. It's not about me. It's about how you treat people before you know anything about them. He swallowed hard, his bravado gone. You're right. We were wrong. His wife finally spoke. I hope you understand, we just didn't know who you were. Cole let out a quiet chuckle. That's the problem. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with decency. The deputy added, if you were just some kid from town, would you have yelled the same way? Because that says more than you realize. The woman's face flushed. She looked down, saying nothing. The parking lot had gone quiet. A few shoppers nearby had paused, clearly picking up on the tension and piecing together what had just happened. One woman in gym clothes gave me a subtle thumbs up. Another guy nodded respectfully in passing. Cole clapped a hand on my shoulder. You good? Always, I said. We started walking toward our vehicles when the man called out again, desperation creeping into his voice. Can we do anything to make this right? I paused. Then, without looking back, I said, start by doing better when no one's watching. That's where real character lives. I got in my SUV. Cole in his truck. The deputy gave a respectful salute, and we rolled out of that parking lot like we'd just left a mission, quiet, intact, and letting karma finish the rest. Later that evening, I sat on the back deck of my house, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The world felt quiet again, the kind of quiet that only comes after you've walked away from a confrontation without losing yourself to it. Cole called me just before nightfall. You sure you're good? He asked again. Yeah, I said. I'm not angry. Just, reminded. Reminded of what? That respect is something some people only give when they think it's earned through titles or medals. But it should be a starting point, not a reward. He was quiet for a moment, then said, you gave them more grace than I would have. I smiled faintly. Discipline isn't just for combat. Sometimes the hardest mission is staying calm when you've got every reason not to. We hung up. And I thought back to the couple. I don't know what happened to them after that. Maybe they went home and laughed it off. Maybe they told themselves a different version of the story. Or maybe, just maybe, they sat in their car in silence, realizing they'd been handed a lesson by life itself. No shouting. No lawsuits. Just the humbling slap of truth. Not everyone gets that kind of moment. But the ones who do. They never forget the day they picked a fight over a parking spot. And learned who not to mess with, 7 minutes later. A few days passed. I went back to the same grocery store, same lot. Parked in the same general area, habit, I guess. This time, no drama. Just the buzz of everyday life, carts rolling, kids whining, distant car horns. As I walked out with a bag of fresh fruit and protein bars, I saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench near the entrance. It was the woman from that day. She stood when she saw me, clutching her purse like it anchored her in place. Her posture was different now, no arrogance, no edge. "I didn't think I'd see you again," she said. "But I've been coming back every day hoping I would." I said nothing. Just waited. She exhaled slowly. "We Googled you." After that day. Of course they had. We saw the missions. The rescue operations. The interviews. Everything, she continued, voice trembling slightly. And it made me feel ashamed. Not just for how we treated you, but for how many others we probably treated the same, without even thinking. She paused. "My husband's been quieter since. He hasn't touched the golf clubs." That part made me smile a little. Then she added something I didn't expect. "We signed up for a local community outreach class," she said. "About assumptions. Bias. Listening before reacting. We didn't want that day to be just an embarrassment. We wanted it to mean something." Finally, I spoke. "That's the difference between failure and growth." She nodded slowly. "Thank you. For not yelling. For being better than we deserved." I gave a small nod. "Just remember, how you treat people before knowing their story, that's the real legacy you leave behind." She wiped her eyes, then walked to her car. No screeching. No entitlement. Just quiet steps toward something better. And as I got in my SUV, I realized, sometimes, karma doesn't just hit hard. Sometimes, it teaches quietly. A week after that second encounter, something unexpected showed up in my mailbox. A letter. Handwritten. Neat cursive on thick, ivory paper. It was from the husband. "Commander Hall, you don't know me beyond my worst moment. And yet, you gave me something I didn't deserve, grace." That Saturday, I acted like a man I promised myself I'd never become. Entitled. Reactive. Blind. My wife and I talked, really talked, for the first time in a long time. About how we've moved through the world. About how many people we've misjudged. Dismissed. Labeled without pause. You were the one who finally held the mirror up, without lifting a single hand in anger. I never served. But my father did. Navy. He died when I was a teenager. I think part of my anger that day wasn't about you, it was about how far I'd fallen from the values he taught me. You reminded me of him. I just wanted to say thank you, and to tell you that we've started volunteering at a veteran center outside town. It's not about fixing the past. It's about changing what's next. With respect, Alan Pierce. I folded the letter carefully and set it beside my medals. It didn't undo the moment. It didn't excuse it. But it proved something I'd believed all along, not everyone who lashes out is cruel. Some are just lost. And sometimes, the hardest missions don't require a weapon, just patience, integrity, and the kind of silence that speaks louder than rage. Months passed. Life returned to its steady rhythm. Training sessions, morning runs, check-ins with old teammates. The world kept spinning, but something small had shifted. Not just in them, in me, too. I never set out to teach anyone a lesson. I wasn't looking for recognition or revenge. That's not the mission anymore. Not since I left active duty. But that parking lot incident reminded me that the world doesn't need louder voices. It needs calmer ones. Ones that can absorb the blow and choose not to strike back, not out of weakness, but strength. One afternoon, I dropped by the Veterans Center near the edge of town. I like to stop by sometimes, quietly, help out where I can. As I walked into the community room, I froze. Alan and his wife were there, folding donated clothing. Laughing with an older vet. Smiling genuinely, not because they were being watched, but because they wanted to be there. He saw me. Stood. We didn't speak. Didn't need to. He just gave a subtle, respectful nod. I returned it. Then I turned and walked down the hall toward the next task, the next hand to shake, the next moment that might ask me to be more than a man with a past, but a man someone could learn from. Because sometimes karma doesn't just hit hard. It lands exactly where it's needed, and grows something better in its place. 2 months after that moment at the Veterans Center, my phone rang while I was meal prepping in the kitchen. Unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Commander Hall. Yes, who's this? It's Alan Pierce. I hope it's okay that I called. I got your number from the center. There was a pause. I waited. I just wanted to tell you something, he continued. Next week, I'm speaking at a local leadership workshop. Community event. I was asked to share a turning point in my life, and I chose that day. I didn't say anything at first. I just let it land. I've told my story a dozen times in my head, Alan said. But every version comes back to one truth: you had every reason to embarrass me that day, and instead, you let life handle it. He took a breath. I realized that I don't want my legacy to be the man who yelled over a parking space. I want it to be someone who learned from it, and passed that on. I finally spoke. Then tell the truth, Alan. All of it. Not just about what happened, but about what changed. That's where the value is. I will, he said. I owe it to more than myself now. We hung up. And as I stood there with the phone in one hand and a chef's knife in the other, I realized, redemption doesn't knock with fanfare. It shows up in quiet voices and second chances. And if this story ever gets told on a stage, in a class, or around a dinner table, I hope people understand, sometimes the loudest lesson comes from the man who never raised his voice. A year later, I was invited to a memorial event for fallen veterans in the city. Not as a speaker. Not in uniform. Just as a guest among many. I kept to myself, watching from the back as families laid wreaths, children saluted in oversized caps, and an old bugler played taps beneath a flag-waving half-staff. After the service, as people filtered out, I noticed a small crowd gathering near the community tent. Alan was there. He wasn't wearing golf clothes anymore. Today, he wore a volunteer vest, sleeves rolled, hands working. But what caught me most was the way he spoke to people, patient, present, steady. Like a man who had finally become someone he respected. When he saw me, he smiled and motioned for someone to come over. It was a teenager, maybe 16, looking unsure of himself. This is Commander Hall, Alan said, introducing me. The man who changed how I see everything. I gave the kid a nod. Alan turned to him. You said you didn't know what a real leader looks like. Now you do. I didn't say much. I never do. But that moment, that ripple, meant more than any medal ever pinned to my chest. Because in the end, it wasn't about revenge. Or power. Or pride. It was about legacy. Not the kind carved in stone or printed in history books. But the kind that changes a man, who then changes another, and another after that. All because of 7 minutes in a parking lot.